Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Theological Leftover. We are looking today at part of Genesis chapter 14. Last time we looked at the previous chapter. We have almost three chapters, three stories in a row. Not quite, but almost three stories right in a row where Abram protects or defends his nephew Lot. And each one of these is a different kind of thing going on, a different example of defending. The one today is what you would expect to see, taking up arms to defend, right? Using your physical strength to defend someone else who is in need. Today we have an example of that, even though there are a few things that may surprise you. But in these three examples, we see that defending and protecting our neighbor, our loved ones, or even our enemies, it takes different forms. We saw last time Abram defending the reputation and the property, and as far as that goes, the relationship that he had with his nephew, because of division that was going on between the workers of Abram and the workers of Lot, because they were being so successful that they were starting to step on one another's toes. As they took care of livestock and cattle. And so we saw Abram defending Lot and his property and his well-being by making him an offer. Pick left or right. Pick which land you want, this land or that land. And of course, Lot picked the very best. Abram didn't complain about that. He didn't try to finagle him or take advantage of him. He recognized that he would be provided for by the God who provides all things to all people. And so in faith, he was able to make this enormous sacrifice, which was a great blessing to his nephew Lot. Or it could have been, right? The next section, we see that it doesn't go quite as well for Lot as he hoped. And again, this isn't because Abram was deceitful in any way. He gave a free and open choice to Lot. And unfortunately, the area that Lot chose, even though at the time it may have been good for the livestock and for crops and things like that, the cities in that area, which included Sodom and Gomorrah, were very much corrupt. A lot of politics going on there. And Lot, in chapter 14, gets caught up in those politics. There are four kings, and I don't know exactly what to make, because historically this is long enough ago and these are small enough little kings. They may have been nations, they may have been clans or tribes, and I think probably that's what it is. So historically we can't identify who all of these people are, but there were four kings or leaders that went against five leaders. And I think the idea is, I might get it mixed up. I'm not going to say because I may get it wrong. I forget. But I think it's the five align themselves with one another in order to rebel against the four. But I may have that backwards. You can read it and check. But the one group rebels against the other group that apparently at some point had conquered them. They're paying tribute, taxes, that sort of thing, and they're like, enough. So they decide to rebel, and they're not successful. Part of that unsuccessful group are the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, and that's where Lot is. And so when they fail and when they get defeated, Sodom and Gomorrah get looted. And in that moment, not only does Lot lose everything that he had to these invading kings, but he himself is also captured and is carted away into slavery. And Abram's not having any of that. And this really is kind of a remarkable thing. We don't have a whole lot of numbers, but we would presume that this alliance of either four or five little nations together had a considerable army. But what we hear, in fact, I'll read it to you, chapter 14, starting at verse 13. I'm going to skip all the big names and things. There are a lot of names that I am sure I would just butcher. But I'll start at verse 13 and listen. There's this. So we would assume this sizable, that because of this alliance, this sizable army that has defeated another sizable army, and they've captured Lot, and he's being drug away, he and his household, into slavery. In verse 13, we read, "Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and of Aner." These were allies of Abram. When Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men, born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. Then he brought back all the possessions, and also brought back his kinsman Lot with his possessions, and the women, and the people. So this alliance was unable to conquer the ones who had conquered them. They were defeated. They lost everything. They were looted. They lost their people, their women. Lot was sold into slavery, or carted off into slavery, and there was nothing they could do about it. They were powerless. But here comes Abram. This really sounds a lot like the story of Gideon, right? Here comes Abram with this small little group. I mean, for an army, 318 isn't a lot of people, is it? With this small little group, he even divides his forces and attacks at night, a lot like Gideon will later do. And he's successful. And he brings back not just Lot and his possessions, but the possessions and the people from these, from Sodom and Gomorrah as well. So it's an amazing victory. In fact, you might even say it's a miraculous victory. But here we have Abram taking up arms, fighting literally, physically, in order to defend and protect, right? In order to defend and protect his nephew and his nephew's possessions. And what's interesting is what follows next. And there's a lot of theology in this little section that we're not going to address, because we're just talking about this issue of defense. But the reason I want to encourage you to look at the rest of the chapter, 14, 17 to the end, is because it shows us something about Abram's heart and his faith in the midst of this taking up of arms. Okay? This is not Abram being vengeful. Vengeance isn't his. Vengeance is the Lord's. This isn't him just acting in anger. This is true protecting. This is true defending. And everything he does, you see his faith, his reliance on God, his fearing, loving, and trusting in God above all things is front and center. And it's tested after the victory. The king of Sodom, well, before even the king of Sodom talks to him, is this priest and king, Melchizedek, which you've probably heard about before. We're not going to go into who is Melchizedek today. But Melchizedek comes to him as a high priest of God. He comes to him and he blesses Abram. And Abram, since he's looking at a priest of God, takes this opportunity and he gives thanks to God. Okay? So he recognizes that what he was doing was according to God's will, and he thanks God for giving him the victory. He does this by giving a tenth of everything that is his to Melchizedek, a sort of thank offering, right, that's taken place. So you see, Abram never lost focus or lost faith. He didn't set that stuff aside in order to let loose his anger or something like that. This wasn't something he did separate from his faith. This was something he did in faith because of his faith, right? The other example of it is when this king of Sodom comes and he offers tribute, if you will, to Abram for bringing all this stuff and all these people back. He wants to pay him for what he's done. He wants to reward him. And in verse 32, Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted my hand to the Lord, right hand, right? Making a promise. I've lifted my hand to the Lord, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich. This is not about forming alliances, right? That's not what this is about. This is not about trying to get wealthy. We have already seen it's not about revenge or just lashing out in anger. This was Abram seeking to do what God has called all of us to do when it comes to loving and protecting and defending our neighbor. He did what we are called to do. And sometimes defending our neighbor means fighting for them. Literally, taking up arms, fighting for them. Sometimes that is exactly what we are supposed to do. So we have two of our three examples. The first example is Abram showing a willingness to make a great sacrifice for the well-being of his neighbor. And that was to protect Lot's reputation and also his property and his possessions and his servants. He was willing to sacrifice in order to lift up and to promote the well-being of Lot. Here we have an example of him willing to go to blows, willing to fight, willing to go to battle for Lot when he is physically in danger. But it's not in anger. It's not in order to win favor or promote alliances or anything like that. It's not for financial gain. None of that has anything to do with protection. Right? The next one that we are going to look at, we're going to skip a few chapters, and we're going to look at Genesis chapter 18. And I'm going to wait till tomorrow to do that, but if you've been looking ahead, that's where you want to look. Look at Genesis chapter 18. It's, again, going to be Abram defending Lot, but he's not going to be taking up arms this time. In fact, he and Lot aren't even in the same place. The way that he defends Lot is one of the primary ways. In fact, I'm going to say it is the primary way in which God's people, I feel comfortable saying that. This is the primary way in which God's people protect and defend their neighbors. This is a big one. So if you want to look ahead, Genesis chapter 18, if you have questions, comments about anything we've talked about or this next chapter that we're going to talk about, just leave a comment and I will do my best to address it. God bless you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, and we'll be back tomorrow.